What's going on, friends? I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, and welcome to this week's little lesson. Today, we're putting the guitar down. Go ahead and do it. And we're gonna talk about how to avoid hurting yourself when you play guitar. When I was a student at GIT, I don't think there was a word that was more feared in the halls and in the practice rooms than tendinitis. For those of you that don't know, tendinitis is just a fancy way of saying swollen tendons, and it would usually occur in the wrist, most often the fretting hand, and it was effectively cured with a cortisone shot, something to take the swelling down and a fair amount of rest. But there were some of my fellow students that would go and get that cortisone shot, and within hours, they were back in the practice room shredding away, or wood shedding away, really. But my own experience with injuries didn't really happen until, well, last year. Last year, while working on a landscaping project, aka nothing related to actually playing guitar, I strained my left rotator cuff in my left shoulder, which also, as a right-handed guitar player, happens to be the shoulder that my guitar's strap sits on. So needless to say, this was not a good situation for me. I could barely raise my hand above here, my arm, that is, above here without my other arm helping it to move forward. So even simple things like shampooing my hair was almost impossible. But I rested, I gave it some time, and it healed up. But then it happened again. I rested again, it healed up, and then the injury happened again. Clearly, I was doing something wrong, and I knew I needed to make a change. It was at that point I decided that I was gonna take my wife's advice and go see her chiropractor. Now, he's also not just a chiropractor. He does kinesiology. He also is a personal trainer and a physical therapist. So going to him, getting my first chiropractic adjustment in my life, it was pretty eye-opening. A small adjustment to my neck actually ended up alleviating a lot of that burning pain that was happening in my shoulder. And then further working along my shoulder and my back helped things to feel like the blood and the fluid in my body was actually flowing again. It wasn't enough just to have those chiropractic adjustments. I realized that I had a role to play in my recovery from injury as well. So I asked for some recommendations on stretches and exercises, and thankfully, through a combination of regular chiropractic checkups to make sure everything's in alignment, some stretching and light exercise, focusing on things like the shoulder, the chest, the core, and my arms, things have really healed up nicely. But unfortunately, because one thing is out and maybe I wasn't, paying as much attention, it actually ended up causing another injury down on my fretting hand. At one point, not long ago, I kind of felt like every time I would make a grip, I would close my hand, I could feel tension pulling across my fretting hand thumb. Great, a fretting hand injury, just what I didn't want. But once again, I realized little bit of a chiropractic adjustment really helped me out, but there were stretches and exercises that I could turn to in order to help this thing heal up, and also remembering to rest. Now, with all my experience with these injuries, one thing that my chiropractor said to me really stuck, and I've tried to keep in mind ever since. If you're a performing musician, you have no idea how much more athletic you are than you think you are. Even if you're someone who's just playing all the time, you are doing a physical activity. Maybe not as physical as someone playing baseball or basketball, football or hockey, but you're still doing something, and you need to take care of yourself like you're doing something. So how can you take my story and apply it to your own guitar journey? Well, I feel like it all boils down to 3 points, and here they are. Point number 1, the importance of stretching and warming up. Athletes do it, musicians should do it too. I never had a warm-up routine. I just went right into playing, and I think if I had a warm-up routine, this injury that happened on my fretting hand thumb may not have been as bad as it turned out to be. Point number 2 is recognizing your limits. When I think back on the day that I originally injured my rotator cuff, I was working very hard and I was doing a repetitive motion that I really shouldn't have been doing as long as I had been doing it. But the job had been frustrating. I was losing restraint and control over my emotions, something that I should probably be working on. But if I would have been more cognizant of the fact that I was doing something I shouldn't be doing for an extended period of time, I could have very easily avoided the uncomfortableness of this injury. But it can even be something that you pay attention to on the gig, in the studio, or when you're writing something for yourself. What I really felt aggravated this thumb injury was playing one week at church. There was a particular part that they really wanted me to play on a particular song. And the way that my hand was oriented, the fingering that I had to get in order to get the right tonality for the part, and the length with which I had to play that part, I could tell in rehearsal that morning that if I played this part too much, something was gonna hurt by the end of the day. Unfortunately, I didn't pay too close attention to that, and sure enough, the next morning, I didn't feel like I could pick up a guitar at all. And I want to add a little 0.5 to the end of this to piggyback off that. You need to be vocal about how you're feeling with your bandmates, your songwriting partners, whoever you're working with. Because if you're not being honest with the people that you're working with, you're not being honest with yourself. Had I just spoken up and said, hey, can somebody else take this part for a little bit? Or maybe I can do something else that'll contribute to this song, I probably would have avoided that injury entirely. And the last and final point is the simplest: rest. I cannot stress the importance of rest from any physical activity more than I can now. Now, although we didn't pick up and play our guitars in this week's little lesson, I really hope you got something out of it and that you'll implement some of these ideas into your routine sooner rather than later. But if you already have a warm-up routine, I would love to know what it is, because I am just out of ideas completely on how to make my warm-up routines a little less boring. If you have any suggestions or questions, let me know what they are in the comments section down below, because you never know, your question could very well be the subject of next week's little lesson video. And if you enjoyed this and want to see more, click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you'd like to stay more up to date on what's going on here on the channel, my musical world, and even win some free gear, join my email club at seanpiercejohnson.com/email. And if you'd like to support the channel with your hard-earned cash, use the affiliate links I have in the description box down below. Each sale just generates a little commission that I can use to help fund the content here on the channel. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's little lesson. I look forward to seeing you all next week. And until then, I wish you all great tone, great health, and happy stomping. Cheers, friends. God bless.